I think we can begin. For this next panel session, I'm very pleased. It's a topic that we try to cover every year on sustainability and also artisanal small-scale mining. And I'm so happy to have three guests here who are very focused on South America, and this wasn't even intentional. Right? We have Brian Cook, who's been going back and forth to Brazil for the last 50 years and works with Brazilian gem miners. Marcin from the Fair Miners Alliance for Responsible Mining, which is based in Colombia. And you are their CEO for Europe, so working on fair mined gold. And Felix, who was already present last year in exhibits here from the company Aurhen and Brazil Gems, who's been setting up traceable supply chains around colored gemstones for many years. And I'm so happy to have these three guests here. And the title for today's talk was really looking about ASM, gold and gems. We hear a lot of bad news in the news, unfortunately, be it mercury for gold or also with gemstones, the things are not going so well. And we kind of wanted to shift this perspective and hear really insights from the ground from the three of you. So let me begin. Sorry, let me just get my questions with Brian. You've been working with gem communities, gem miners in Brazil for many decades. What is the biggest gap that you see between what happens at a trade show here and the reality of the miners on the ground who you feel very passionate about? Tough question to start with.
Yeah.
We've got a nice image to go with.
What a surprise. Yeah, I wanted to put up an image. Thank you, Laurent, for the invitation. Also, it's my first visit to INHORGENTA. I'm very thrilled. It's a beautiful show. I'm very excited to meet the new designers and the schools. So the question about what it looks like responsible sourcing upstream versus downstream. And I think responsible sourcing, first I'd like to mention that I like that you use the term responsible because ethical, I don't use that anymore. Ethical, the word begs controversy. It's too complicated, but responsible is simple. I think downstream, responsible sourcing has like a checklist, a box that you check off. No child labor, formalized operations, there's no environmental harm. These things are boxes that you check off, but the reality, back in the jungle, we're dealing with communities that are dealing with social and economic survival. And it gets messy because being formalized is not an easy thing for small-scale artisanal miners, typically because there's not support from governments. Governments, at least in Brazil where I work, they're focused more on big mining operations. And the capital is scarce. So it's sort of a big difference. I think the people here should understand that responsible sourcing, there's a number of factors, and there's always good things that can happen at the source, traceability, helping people at the source. But it's good to understand that it's a very complex world at these small-scale mining communities.
So, Felix, how have you grappled with this complex world on the ground and then here? Because essentially you're working with miners and cutters and you're selling the gems here. And I think everybody here agrees that we want responsible gems and gold to be on the market, but there's not that much on the market. So what's kind of your experience with this? Have you done it at a small scale and that has helped you really build this model that works? Can it be scaled? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I think it was quite luck that we got in that situation to get to know a family who's in the mining processes and already had the first touches with cutting as well. And then they were super willing to do a change. So that's not happening always. And the experience that we made the last 25 years is that the transparency is kind of the base for that kind of work. So first of all, you need a supply chain that is completely transparent. And then you can start doing the work, like working in each step of the value chain to improve the situation. So I think there's a very big gap between what people are talking over here and what they're actually doing in the mines and in the cutting shops as well. So, yeah, and the worst impact on the environment is obviously at the mining. So that's the part where we need to focus on. And if we don't have the transparency, we can't get to the mine. So at the end of the day, it was pretty much trial and error at the beginning. And afterwards, like after 1 or 2 years, the intense work, the scientific work with the University of Aachen to figure out, okay, what are the minimum standards that need to be fulfilled? And I just want to give a little example to that case. That doesn't happen from today to tomorrow. So 3 years ago, we had the first case where one of our miners and one of our cutters sent their children to university. So that's pretty extraordinary, to be honest, because normally if you're in one of those circles where you say, okay, he's a miner, my son will be a miner, and like child labor was a social system that we want to get rid of, and therefore we need a transformation, but that will not happen within that generation directly. It takes many, many years to develop. So at the end of the day, you really need to make sure what is the culture that's living there, because it doesn't help if I tell them how to do their work. Yeah, they have their experience. Yeah. So in that case, it's listening a lot to the local people, try to figure out what their values are, what their lifestyle is, what the important things are, and then together you can find a way out of that situation.
Okay. And for Fair Mind, I mean, you've spoken to a lot of artisanal small-scale miners. Maybe, I don't know, do you know the figure off the top of your head? How many ASM miners are there in the world? Is it 50 million? Yeah, there's figures that get thrown around like that. But exactly. What do you hear when you speak to them? What do they need? What's happening on the ground?
Well, what's happening on the ground is, I think, we have these two extreme perceptions of ASM. On the one hand, these, horrific stories of child labor and people under the point of the gun. On the other hand, these idealized communities and, cooperatives working together. And the reality is somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. I think it's, actually a fair comparison to SMEs, trying to make a living. Mining is a hard work, it's risky, but at the end is the best choice that they have. And this is why people do it. And as you said, you are actually putting food on the table, you are paying for your children's education, and you're going to continue doing that. The numbers, it's the estimates are that more than 20 million people are doing gold mining. Apparently 80% of gemstones production comes from the ASM. So if you count the families, if you count the kind of economic network, people that are living out of it, it's like 100 million people, so more than the population of Germany. And I think that's, it's an important thing to consider. So if you're a jeweler, what is a responsible thing to do? Like, do you face this reality and make small steps to change it and to improve things on the ground? Or you just pretend that, it doesn't exist. And mining is a bit like an inconvenient truth of the jewelry world, because, maybe we're going to do recycled gold and mining will disappear. Well, the answer is that it won't disappear. As long as the prices are high, people will mine it, but they will just sell it to unscrupulous buyers that don't care about social and environmental impacts. And possibly this gold, after traveling all around the year, will come into recycled supply chains anyway. So I think if we're being honest and if we really want to contribute to solutions, this is the best opportunity you can get.
So, Brian, a follow-up question on that. Do we need standards? What do standards do? I mean, I listened to Marcelo's talk before, and he was talking from the heart about what he's doing in Brazil. Do you think that we need to define all these things? And why? And why does it sometimes not work?
No, standards are important, but we have to realize that standards for these artisanal miners, I've included a photo of an artisanal mine, and indeed this is an old photo, but today new startup mines look very similar to this. So the standards, they have to be at the source like this. These folks need help to fulfill the basic requirements, health and safety. No child labor. In Brazil, children do not work in mines. They're very strict about it. And but standards indeed are important. It's something to strive for. Here's another photo. Another thing to realize, I work in the colored stone industry, and as Marcin said, 80% of production of colored gemstones and crystals and minerals come from artisanal miners scattered all over the world, and it very much looks like this. And also remember that some of the great discoveries of gemstones start like this. This is a photo of the Paraíba Batalha mine when it first opened. So these folks that are at the bottom here, they are the foundation of this industry. If you think about it, those high couture brands that sell the stones and aggregate tremendous value, at the bottom of the receiving end are these folks. So I think, interestingly enough, is that the people that are interested in supporting the concepts and these standards, I think they're trying to strive essentially to add more value and support these folks. And as an industry, if we support these folks at the bottom through helping health and safety, basic things like this, added programs like Felix is doing, that's way that we can actually benefit the whole industry at large. It adds relevance to the product by helping the communities that supply the basic raw materials.
Thank you. So it's not just about standards. I mean, for Fairmind, it's also about working long-term in partnership with people, with communities. Can you share your experience on standards? You have the Fairmind standard, but you also came up with the craft code. In some countries, you've been very successful, in others less so. What is your experience with this?
Yeah, the experience, I think standards are like a common language that, miners know what people expect from them, but also for jewelers, it helps understand, what's behind working towards responsibility. And as you said, I think it's, it has to be considered a journey. For Fairmind, it's also about, scalability, about efficiency, because you can work with mines in different places in their countries. We're collaborating with over 200 jewelers in over 30 countries, and having the standard is this common understanding of what we are doing. It helps work together. Fairmind, how we approach this, how you apply it on the ground. Fairmind is a high-level standard. It's kind of best practice. And the idea there is also to show what's possible. What's the horizon, what's the ambition, what can be achieved with ASM. And of course, there are some incentives there. But then the majority of the ASM, are far from this level. And this is really where a lot of work has to be done. The standard that the craft code is based on the due diligence guidance, so kind of an minimum entry-level requirements for the market to start engaging. But also, I think it has to be said that, as you said, it's a complex scenario, it's a complex reality, and market can tip the scale with incentives. But then I think there's a lot of work on the ground that has to be done first, by governments supporting this basic organization, health and safety, and that's also something that we try to do. And maybe not all these materials are kind of market ready, but I do think that the industry as a whole shares this responsibility about how we bring everyone, up to a decent level, so that it actually, so that you actually can transparently then engage with these miners.
And it's a journey, right? And the journey's not over.
It's a journey, and it's a journey in difficult conditions. I think, when we hear about SMEs in Europe struggling, these guys are struggling, but in much more complex reality. And I think it's really important to put yourself in the shoes of these communities and really work together, but also understand what's happening and how you can contribute.
And this picture, is it your picture or it's Brian's picture? I mean, usually
it's Jan Spille's picture.
Jan Spille's picture. Usually people show pictures of like big holes, and artisanal mining looks very bad. What's with these solar panels? Can you share a little bit on this?
Yeah, well, that was an area where we traveled with Jan Spille. So he came with us to Brazil to go to the ground. And recently we are looking for new places to do the mining. And that was an area where we had a stopover at the fazenda, and there was some good-looking ground, I don't know, 1-2 kilometers away. So all the miners were allowed to live there, and the entire energy supply was through those solar panels. And that's pretty much also the idea that we have if we go to a new ground, if you do exploration and all that stuff, that we want to do, like, starting from the first step, to be aware of what we do there, so that we don't set up an infrastructure that we would remove afterwards. So that's the idea behind it.
So did you help fund this as a business partner, or do you see that being part of your business model to kind of enable and improve livelihoods of communities?
To be honest, the solar panels, they are the only right solution for electricity in the backcountry. Isn't it, Brian?
It's a great solution. And this is a good point here. For example, where I'm working, we worked with the local government, and we have a crisis of silicosis because the miners began mining with pneumatic hammers a couple decades ago, but didn't have the understanding of the effect of the dust on the lungs. Today, silicosis is a problem. So there's groups that are trying to raise money and do raise money through donations, and we created a program with the health secretary and the education secretary to educate about silicosis. And at the end of that program, the miners and their families attending that course, the miners would get a certificate from the city, and we would give them the proper silicone dust protection. And these are just some images of some of the miners in our community. And Brazil is a beautiful mix of black and white and indigenous. And these are all miners from the area, just a handful of them. And so there are programs happening. There are people trying to get help to the source. You need to collaborate with the local government, and we have support there. But we also need to attract funding so that we can create the stories that our industry is looking for. There's a lot of talk about how wonderful the responsible sourcing is, but the truth is that there's very little action on the ground, and this is where we need to create. There's a big gap between what is spoken about and what we need to do. But we need more examples of success stories. And that's what we're working on, and that's what Felix is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say one more sentence to your previous question about that solar panel. Like, if we fund it, if we are involved in funding all that stuff, that's something where we are pretty strict. We don't want to be involved in their business. They're adults, they know how to do business, and if not, they need to learn how to do business. So we want to keep our fingers out because we have our added value in Germany or Europe. So we do the importation of the stones and everything. And everything that's in Brazil, we want to stay with the miners and with the cutters and with nobody else. I don't want any percentage in Brazil of any company because it's their profit. They are working hard on it.
You pay them, the business model is you pay them a very fair price for the stones, and with that money, they invest it how they want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We pay very high prices when buying the stones. That's also a bit of a motivation for them to work nice in the cutting shop, because otherwise I reject the stones and then they need to sell it for a low price to Sao Paulo. And well, that's not in their interest, to sell the gemstones cheaper. So yeah, I think they really need to get on their own feet to set up their own business. And one more sentence to the standards and to the ground. I think it's important to really find a good mix there. We don't need standards at the ground, but we need frameworks, we need goals, we need to know where we want to go, what we want to achieve. Yeah. And we need to show the local people and help the local people getting there by themselves without saying, oh, you need to do this right now, you need to do that right now, because otherwise you turn around and everything changes again. So they really need to understand they have a big added value if they do a social and ecological job there.
So what is, because you have a very unique perspective from Fairmind with all the last 2-3 decades of experience. What is this? How do you interact with the miners? There's also the premium, how they reinvested. I'm sure you've trialed different models over the years. What works?
Yeah, we have, and I think standards. I think it also depends how we understand them. As you say, we see it more as a framework. Also, it's like a roadmap, so that okay, what are the things that I need to improve and how I work on them. And in a way, the premium is a kind of, because we do need incentives. I think, and this is the main, role of the market, how we provide incentives so that people really, start pushing towards improvement. The Fairmind premium, it was set more than 10 years ago at $4,000 per kilo, $4,000. It stays the same. Then it was 10% of the price of gold. Now it's like 2.5%. So in a way, it's getting cheaper. The responsible gold is getting cheaper and the value added. And what happens with this? Again, as you say, miners invested in renewable energy to improve the efficiency of their operations, improve the health and safety, because nothing is perfect. There's still a lot of investment to be done. But they also invest in, for example, a daycare for kids with disabilities, or for education for young people. So there is this relation with the community. They're part of the community, and in the end, everyone wants to progress, and we can be part of it.
And Brian, you have several decades of experience in Brazil as well. I'm sure you've tested different models of how involved you are also in community development. What is? I think you have a few pictures to share as well.
Yeah, so what my vision is here is we started with the basics. First, I helped formalize, taught them how to go through the formalization process of staking claims. Then we created a miners cooperative. Then the health and safety, which we just addressed. But the thing is after the stones come out and the women come up, there's been some production. They produce low grade, they gather everything left over, they work that. They're able to sell at the weekly, there's a market for the women to sell their goods. And What we want to do next is work directly with the women. It's a very simple stepping stone process. We're going to get some basic equipment, tumblers and sonic drills. We can create tumblestones and beads and create an instant market for the low-grade material and create a revenue there, expand into lapidary, cabochons, etc. And what's going to happen with that, it will create entrepreneurship because this will be their material, but we're going to help them get started by supplying, getting the funding to get the equipment. We'll be working with the cooperative. They're involved directly. So my long-term vision is the next step after the basics is how do we sustain a community that's based on mining, and mining is not sustainable. So with the entrepreneurship of creating business, the next tier for me is to create a science curriculum connected with the high school and create a science curriculum based on regenerative agriculture. So there's the science of soil science, the good food, and then we look for products that you can grow that have cash value. It could be essential oils, herbs, spice, medicine, and start creating that example of creating new revenue based on using the resource that is there. So you add value, creates more money locally, and then that's the overall thing. And these are the stories that our industry is looking for. But essentially, when the mining runs out, maybe there's something already in place for the future.
And we do need to think about a post-mining future, right? What are your thoughts on this for where you're working in Brazil?
I think it's a great idea to think about how to develop for the future and get a system rolling that's really working. To be honest, I had similar thoughts about that, like doing kind of or one day being able to do like ecotourism surrounding the mining, because I think a demand will always be there. There will always be expertise in Brazil, people doing mining, people love mining. If I think about the family I'm working with, they can't imagine doing something else. So it's getting through generations. So it would be great to one day not have any mining anymore, because I've got the same opinion as Brian. Mining gemstones cannot be sustainable, but it can be as sustainable as possible. So you really need to think about a structure for the future. And I think that's one very important point that I learned about the past 25 years. There were many initiatives to do some social work, some work on the entire community to set something up. And there were many projects that were just based on support from someone else. They never thought about getting an economic system that's really financing itself. And at the end of the day, there was a generation of idealists. They stopped working, and it was a complete step back at the ground because people started to sell their gold back to the drug smugglers and whatever. So I think it's very important to keep an eye on the economic value they create at that place.
Yeah, precisely.
And San Francisco was built on gold, right? San Francisco was just a gold mining place, and look at it today. What is your vision for some of these gold mining communities? Not to say that people can emulate what happened with San Francisco, but I mean, mining also brought wealth in certain regions of the globe. People managed to use some of that money and transform it into long-term economic success or livelihoods that are far more resilient.
I think the important thing is that, it's not my vision, it's their vision. Yeah. And I think people know, what works and what doesn't. So you're saying sometimes, you can be well-intentioned and tell a miner, well, why don't you do beekeeping or something? And it may be a good idea or maybe not. But we, some of the cooperatives that we work with, already are investing in this. So, for example, the money from the premium, they've invested in supporting the miners or the community of the families of the miners to grow coffee. and some of these mines have coffee that is also certified and certified gold. So obviously they are thinking about the future. The problem is, I think they're also those who manage to get to a certain level of independence. The problem is that in many places the system is broken. The miners don't have even basic investment to operate. And what that means is that they have to borrow money from some unscrupulous lenders, and they're stuck in this kind of never-ending poverty trap. But the thing is that gold or gemstones, it's hard currency, and it really depends what you do with this value.
Yeah, it's hard currency, but Brian, you're a geologist. It's not that easy to find gold or gemstones, right?
No, of
or
course
gemstones
not.
of high quality. So it's not the same as banana farming or farming rice. The business model is a little different. What are your experiences?
Exactly. I mean, you can. I know miners that mine for months on end with no production, and so it's a scramble constantly, and that's why I'm part of a group that Gems Keep Giving. We're looking for projects anywhere in the world, but we want to invest directly in communities and have direct impact. And like you said, we're not coming to say you should do this. No, we ask the community, what do you need? And then in this case, how can we add value so that you can prosper more, get more value from your resource? And then with an example of how to invest some of that for the future. And, that's why I'm very passionate about working in regenerative agriculture, because the whole planet needs that, basically, if we're gonna make it. And, essentially, we're doing this work to sustain our industry. The people, the younger generation who has most interest in this, and it's not just younger people, but it's a high percentage. It's the young of heart. There's us that care about it too, and think progressively for a future. So that's where the support is beginning. But I believe that this type of projects and supporting communities at the source is what will add value and relevance to the product. And these are the stories that we need. And, that's who we're doing it for, for the next generations. We want them to be able to go on.
So Felix, if there's one thing, how to accelerate responsible ASM or responsible gems, what would you wish for? Or what can you think of?
I've been thinking about that question for the last 3 days. To be honest, it's quite difficult because, it's such a big topic, and there are so less examples, at least I know, where I could say, okay, something could leverage the entire development. So, to be honest, I can just take a look at what we are doing, and I think the best would be that people think about what is a fair allocation of the resources, especially of money that we have out of Europe, where we say, okay, how can we get the money to the hardworking people? Because once they have a base, an economic base, they can start to fulfill their own dreams, go after what they really want to do, and can decide completely free if they want to do mining or if they want to become a teacher.
I think what we can do now is there's two things. There's our industry, and the top tier of our industry should look more towards the source, and the other department that needs to start looking at the source is the governments. In Brazil, the Brazilian government has this tremendous resource right there in Brazil. It's one of the traditional big gem producers, yet all the potential are based around these communities that are struggling to survive, and all they need is a little bit of help from the government to formalize, maybe make it simpler, simplification, and then these companies that talk about benefiting are responsible. They could also find ways to invest in the people who are actually the boots on the ground making these stories. And I know there's not that many, but it's something that we should all strive for, I think.
So does this mean buying more responsible ASM gems, that essentially that's kind of the model, because that goes directly back into these miners' pockets?
Yes, and that's part of it. I mean, we're establishing trust with designers and emerging designers that really are asking these questions and want to know, and we have to build that trust through our models and through what we can show through our stories. And then we create business that way. And it's a very small slice of the industry. It's tiny, but I believe that that portion of our industry is going to expand as we go forward.
And I think gold is a little bit ahead of gemstones in that regard. You're a small slice also of a very big industry. Mm-hmm. How do you see that, let's say, responsible gold or ASM gold could be further accelerated?
Well, honestly, I think, we always think, like, how do we save the whole world? How do we solve all the issues? It's not possible. But at the same time, there have been initiatives, there are various options, they are already established for jewelers. They are super easy to make the first step and contribute. And still, I think we're not seeing this uptake, right? Mm-hmm. So, Fairmind, we've been doing it for over 10 years. And honestly, we were expecting a higher growth. We have mines that are candidate, they would like to join the program, but still the demand is not there. And what I would expect is from companies to commit long term, because it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? The big brands are asking like, we need a lot of gold. That's great. Let's agree. We're going to work on bringing this gold, but we need to work together and to grow it together. So let's not wait. There are imperfect solutions, but there are some. So let's just do it.
Let's commit. Yeah.
Yeah, let me finish with one more positive sentence, because I haven't had too much positive stuff in my last sentence. I think everyone just needs to make sure that you do every day, it doesn't matter if it's jewelry, clothing, whatever, wherever you can have a small impact is more than non-impact. So I think that's what we all can do so far. And at the end of the day, you just need to, you always have a choice. At least we in Europe always have a choice. So make the right choices, and then hopefully everything will improve.
Thank you. And I think we have 3 great initiatives here, and examples of where people can collaborate, come and speak with you, learn more about your projects and become engaged. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and also your experiences. And thank you.
Thank you.
There's maybe a question from the audience. We can take a question from the audience. Otherwise, I believe these 3 gentlemen will be around here a little bit longer. Oh, there is a question, Risha. How do we connect story with all this? You being a storyteller.
Hi. So as a journalist, I've been writing about responsible sourcing of colored gemstones for a couple of years, quite a few years now. And it's a topic that infuriates me every time I get a commission from a publication to write on it, and especially after writing the book, I could have written a parallel book which was the uncensored version of the stories, because for every story in the book there was like, can you stop the recording because I'm going to tell you one little bit, but you can't put it in the book. And that always comes back to corruption on the ground, security issues on the ground, lack of government support, where a licensed mine owner has a gang of dacoits come and someone has an accident and he calls the cops and the cops come, and they start stealing, right? And those are real issues that happen. And what's my question, I will come to a question, is that with every solution, it almost seems as if the focus is only on one little segment of the entire chain. The issue, and the colored gemstones and gold is very different. I see it as very different because when you look at a rough colored stone, it looks like a colorful pebble that could have been in a planter on the ground, And with gold, it's different. And so looking at gold, let me come to you first, and looking at colored gemstones, if you had to pick one thing that you think helped in the progression and of this responsible journey for gold, for fair mined gold, what is that one thing that you think helped?
For fair mind, I really think, two things. So like, if we want to grow the pie, we need to scale it up. And for that, you need long-term engagements, long-term projections. But we also, I think, we need to be pragmatic and realistic. So, for example, full traceability across the whole system, it's possible, we do it, but it costs. And it's tricky, there's a lot of logistics. And actually, if you look at the premium that the miners get, sometimes it's less than the cost of traceability. So it's also an uncomfortable question that that we need to ask ourselves: what's important for us, right? Is it more important to support the mines to bring more people and to make things simpler, or do we really need to know where this piece of gold comes from? The answer maybe for many people who are super engaged is both, but maybe if we want to scale it up and really start thinking in tons rather than kilos, maybe we need to also open up and think how to make things scalable and practical. But you're right again. I think that what is happening on the ground is super complex, and the market can put some pressure. Like if you jointly get together, you can even influence governments. But in the end, there's only so much you can do with these situations. So it's I don't know if you guys have any brilliant ideas on how to solve these systemic issues. It's slow, and you need a lot of people in the room and an honest conversation on how to do it.
Thank you all. I think we need to come to an end because we have one final speaker, but you guys will still be around.
Yeah. Any questions, just meet with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sustainability.